First question here, like what is golf specific training? I feel, what comes to mind right when you think about it? I think social media's kind of gotten away from it. Um, how they view golf or how people on there portray golf specific training is usually in a way to it ends up being a selling a program or some type of their own kind of self purpose for it. And I don't think it resolves in what actually golf specific training is supposed to be. First thing on what I believe golf specific training is, looking at some muscle EMG studies here at what actually goes on in the swing. Some things that stand out for me here, really big hip extension pattern. Seeing it on both these studies here. This one is coming out of Strength Conditioning for Golf book by Bliss, and then Muscle Activity During the Golf Swing by McCarty and Pollard. Um, yeah, hip extension's big, and then obviously these big during the acceleration on the downswing here of pec major and the lats. So same thing when people try to talk about golf specific, it's just what are they doing something that's resulting in high activation levels of that? And what I see really doesn't tend to be that. New study here, regulation of ground forces during the golf swing stands out here. Very large vertical ground reaction forces going on. Very important. Being able to produce high levels of force and push that through into the ground. Going back to my social media golf specific example, when you see that, is anybody putting any force in the ground when they're showing exercise that they claim is golf specific? But it's not just putting force in the ground here, it's also doing that in a timely manner. This is a really great study here, associations between physical characteristics and golf club head speed, reviewed by Brennan. Chris Bishop was part of that. Dan Collin is a great colleague out in the UK, also a part of that crew. Looking here, so obviously, like I was just talking about force putting in the ground, really important, but what's the most positively associated with golf club head speed is impulse. So that's where impulse, looking at force times, you want to do large amounts of force and you want to do it within a timely manner. But what is that timely manner? When we're looking at downswing duration here, top of backswing to impact, that time frame under 300 milliseconds. And in sport terms, like that's actually quite a bit of time. When you look at like a Olympic level sprinter, their ground, like they have 80 milliseconds to get on the ground. But in the golf world, things need to be done within this time frame. You gotta be looking at within a third of a second here. X factor here, for those that are unfamiliar with the term in the golf world, that is, so we have the pelvis angle and then, or the pelvis and torso separation. PGA Tour average is roughly around 45 degrees. And you have this movement here where once they get in their backswing, actually what starts to lead it is there's this hip pelvis movement, which creates even more kind of tension and pull, kind of thinking like slingshot here, where you get this big pull and then it closes this gap where it goes from that roughly 45 to almost lined up. And that right there, rotational stretch shortening cycle, super important that they have the ability of to do that elastic energy and have the capabilities in their body to withstand that force going through in that time manner. So what is goal specific training here? We're looking to develop muscles most activated during the swing. Like I talked about, that's I'm going after hip extension and looking at some big compound movements for the upper body with that pec and lat involvement. Looking to produce large ground reaction forces in a vertical manner. And then once we get into the producing a lot of force, then the time component comes in, improving that impulse within 300 milliseconds, looking to increase rate of force development, and finally challenge rotational stretch shortening cycle in that utilization of that elastic energy. So for me, phase one, early off season, so this would time up with the PGA Tour guys that I have. We're looking at either post playoffs or with Ryder Cup or President's Cup, kind of getting into September. So we're looking either early September or kind of that early October period, starting our off-season cycle. For me, this is the most important time. It's a big GPP. It's kind of getting them to rest, relax. The travel season's already, that was a 8 month stint of very intensive. We'll get into that in a little bit here. I'll talk more on that. But after having a very intense season, first thing is kind of GPP, kind of reorganize, get going. I like Mondays, I'm doing tempo eccentrics. Tuesdays, field work and some oxidative sled work I'll talk about. As you see here, Wednesday and Saturdays, I'm big on the pool. Real big part of that was 2 years ago with spending time with Bill Knowles and kind of seeing how he incorporates it in his return to sport kind of cases where I'm trying to get these guys in the pool as much as I can. It started as I was incorporating it once a week. Very quickly, the next off season, it was twice a week, and honestly, I'd love to incorporate it more, but there's also other things we got to get to. So really happy having it too. Thursday is more of a strength day, kind of anatomical adaptation. And then Friday, flywheel. At this point in the year with flywheel, I'm looking at um, bigger, heavier wheels, slower movements, but everything here is full ranges of motion. So Monday being tempo eccentric emphasis, looking at a 6 to 10 second eccentric, with the 1080 usually incorporating some like 20 to 30% of an eccentric overload. Right here is a little bit of extra horizontal overload. Want to be able to maintain the tension and rhythm during the movement. And again, emphasis on big full ranges of motions, trying to get full range out of the knee, getting it out of the ankle, and hip. Again, as I talked about, hip extension being a big pattern that I'm trying to develop when I'm looking at it early in the off season. Um, I want to get some stretch in there. I want to get that to open up a bit. I want that hip range of motion to reset. With tempo eccentrics, I'm usually in a 2 to 4 set and then a 4 to 6 rep range. Field work to kind of start off that phase one. Oxidative sleds have kind of been a mainstay for me the past couple of years. Super light resistance, constant, smooth. I guess what's kind of maybe unique with me is obviously with golf, the way I use the 1080 sprint with them is obviously very different. In phase three, I do some sprints, but obviously for me, more phase one, phase two time, I'm using it as more of a sled, and it's actually worked out really well having it to not have it be not dealing with the friction on the ground or kind of where it gets kind of short and choppy where resistance just stays smooth. With this oxidative sled work, usually have them on a polar heart rate strap, trying to keep them in that high zone two and low zone three off the polar kind of levels, dial in there. Can play around a little bit with eccentrics as well, where either you can dial that speed way down and have it just kind of be a walk back, more restorative, or you can increase that speed and make them kind of resist and kind of some early deceleration type work with that. I have them on there for 30 minutes straight and usually have the cone set out 70 meters where they're out and they're coming back. Phase one, I get into single joint isokinetics. With these, on this type of time, I'm going a little higher speeds on the isokinetics, going zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.6. That actually depends on the movement range. So like here with these adductor squeeze isokinetics, I'd say if I remember right, that was like a zero point zero 0.08 meters per second. So obviously the slower or the less range of motion that you're going, the slower you want that speeds and the more you're doing. So when I'm looking at like for a shoulder, kind of doing some early type of rehab type things, big range of motion, big movements, that might be up with a more zero point 0.6. Other things kind of sit in that zero point 0.4. This is for me the one time that I use isotonic on the 1080 equipment. Otherwise, I'm almost always kind of in that no fly weight setting for this kind of same thing, especially if an athlete's dealing with an injury or some pretty big imbalances there, or I guess more so on the injury side for the isotonics, where I don't want that big inertia at the start, where I want it to be very smooth and very comfortable for them. Uh, Using these, it's kind of like a furthering your assessment kind of profile. where you identify more imbalances and addressing kind of deficiencies to make sure as you kind of work your way through an off season, keep getting better and not everything that's lingering behind. With these, same kind of setup, 3 to 4 sets, 5 to 6 reps. Strength day, that's more anatomical adaptation in the phase one. Again, talking about before, same thing with those EMGs, hip extensions, a big focus here. Non-1080 wise, that's the reverse leg press is a pretty mainstay exercise selection for me during this time. Same thing, really developing that glute and that hamstring hip extension pattern while also opening up that hip flexor and getting a great stretch through that. Getting to some calisthenics at that time period. As they get better and progress, this might not happen in the same year, but coming back into the second off season or a third off season, as they continue to improve with things that I've been giving them, that's where I get into adding more weight. I'm really, really big fan here of resisted weight on the push-ups, having that 1080 cable, both from one-to-one concentric, eccentric, and also adding a little bit of eccentric overload on it in a strength movement. I was just talking to Austin Einhorn a couple days ago because he put out a post and he was talking about kind of some push-up things and things he's seeing, and we seem to be pretty much on the same page on what I'm seeing. Where when I get really good at weighted push-ups, it's just this tide that lifts in other pressing movements where I see the benefit pay off in doing this phase one, whereas phase two and phase three, as we're getting into heavier and more max strength development and some concentric power, where it really pays dividends later on. This time, doing 2 to 4 sets and 8 to 15 reps. I also do need to make a comment too. This setup came from, I'll give Ben Prentice's credit. So, Ben, if you're on here, I want to make sure because you're probably sitting there thinking about it. This was spending time with Ben and what he's kind of done with weighted push-ups and the pit shark. I basically spent time with him doing that and then came right back home and found out like how can I set this up and what's the best way. And I'm really, really happy with how what it does and the feel and the response from athletes from it. So once enough time has gone on, phase one for me is kind of a 3 to 6 week, 1 to 2 cycle time. I'm not afraid to extend that. I think and it was with how the PGA Tour season is and how chaotic it can be. I think they need that more time to kind of reset and rebuild these strengths. I'm not in a rush because I know having them year round, we're going to get there, especially if those phase three and phase four leaks into early start of the year. I'm fine with that because I'd rather spend more time and kind of that reset and working through in phase one. But there is the time component for me when it does come to phase two. Phase two is my max strength development phase. This I it's the one opportunity out of the year that I really get to kind of push really aggressively when it comes to force outputs. And that time of the year for me, so if our season ends in September, and then the season started. The tough thing with the golf world too is the season never really, you're never completely away. They still have tournaments in the fall, depending on where that guy is in the FedEx Cup rankings. Really depends on how much he needs to play in the fall, but it's pulled back. So for our quote unquote off season, I need this phase to happen in between kind of late October, early November. It's the furthest away from when the season ended, and it's the furthest time point that I have until the season gets going again in kind of mid-January. So the way I set up my max strength development phase, Monday is an eccentric boost day. Tuesday, field work, getting into some glycolytic sled work now. Like I talked about before, really big on the pool. Really need to have these after with how aggressive I'm getting in both the volume and intensity on these days. So really important to have this pool serve as more of a active recovery and reset for the athletes. Thursday is flywheel day. Still kind of staying with the bigger flywheel, but now just rather than kind of going slow and making sure they're getting full range of motion, now it's still full range of motion, but picking up the pace and adding some speed to it. And then Friday being a isokinetic day. So here, eccentric boost. This is Getting into some of this is where I really see the value in having the 1080 quantum sync or having a quantum, having the synchro, and then I wish, and maybe hopefully I'll talk to the 1080 guys on the cable side. It'd be great if they could add that for the 1080 cable users. I view eccentric boost as kind of a function that no one really talks about, but a really, really important thing to do. I view it as true super maximal work. It's just an extremely great way to have a resistant crushing down on you where the athlete has to continually push up and apply force to resist getting thrown down, getting exposure to high levels of mechanical tension here, putting them in a really safe environment. That's huge for me in this phase. Dealing with high level athletes, you never want to put them in positions where you're going to compromise that, and injury is going to cost them millions of dollars at some point if it happens. So the safer you can be, the better. And that's where I view the value of this eccentric boost function, where I can have that resistance go, but they can kind of back out of it if something doesn't feel right. And then having the safety catches always set up where you're never getting into a situation where things start to get dicey. Um, as I talked about, for me, I'm especially with eccentric boost and doing the super maximal eccentric work, it needs to be 8 weeks out. Uh, I need that time for them, for their body to kind of adapt, for muscle, tendon, getting back to it. Needs to be 8 weeks out from start of the season. I'm going in a 4 to 5 set range with 1 to 3 reps on these. From what I've seen on them, that's really where force starts to drop off after that third rep. Sometimes I'm fine going with one, sometimes two. They need to feel it the first time, and then the second one really goes, and then after three, it starts to get a little bit less. So here we have Ricky. These are Eleiko. I think they're plate storage. I talked with Magnus, kind of the president on the North America side of Eleiko. It was really important for me to have these handles when doing this work, kind of same thing. Being able to use the belt setups really important for me. Um, Golf athletes, in a way, I'd use the phrase they're almost allergic to having a barbell on their back, especially the North American athletes that I've kind of seen and been around on that golf side. They didn't grow up with it. They're not used to it. It's very foreign to them. And from a golf perspective, it's probably pretty limiting. And I can sympathize with them on the compression that it puts on that spine when they're trying to rotate at high levels. Like it's not a good feeling. So the more opportunities I can use to get away with it, like I showed in the last slide on the safety squat handle that I made, and being in a belt setup, just much better situation for them to be in. Also really love these RDLs from eccentric boost function as long as they have that hinge pattern down. Really, really great feedback on the feel on these. And from a rotational standpoint here, kind of a golf swing, kind of mimicking position, really going on the eccentric boost of making sure uh, rotationally they can handle that force as they try to resist getting pulled back. Glycolytic sled work kind of came with incorporating the 1080 sprint on these, where when we were doing sleds out here, having some issues with the turf on each day, it kind of seemed to give a different feel and a different resistance on what it would be. So you'd load up a sled one day, it just rained, it was super sticky, like you're hitting dead spots. It wasn't great. And then other days where it was dry and sun had been on it all day, where it was super slick and it felt like you could load up 350 and there's no issue and get through it. So what I kind of ended up doing was incorporating 1080 sprint and using it as a sled, getting some good glycolytic work in there, sitting in that 25 to 45 meter range. Really like actually having that resistance from posteriorly. Same thing on that hip extension pattern driving through there. And the same thing here where you can dial it at eccentric where you push it out and kind of coming back. Either dial it down where it's a nice walk back and they're getting the sled back and just going again, or do that where they're pushing the sled out and then they're having to resist and kind of work on that deceleration pattern on the way back. Not Also can do very different times, not just straight sled push. Lateral sled drag is great. Backwards VMO walks, great. Also, one of my favorites. Don't have the video of it here, but it's a they start out at a distant cone, kind of walking towards with the resistance on the 1080, doing a walking lunge in. It's my number two on my ways to light up a VMO, just right behind straight backwards VMO sled walk, where just does really good work. Isokinetics for me in this phase, staying in that zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.3 meters per second range, really doing compound movements here. So looking at squats and bench press, again, it's exposure to high levels of mechanical tension. It's a really safe environment again for doing concentric max strength. Only resistance there is how much you put into it. Really high motor unit activation during it. And I'm really big during this phase. I'm extending the sets, and I'll get into a second. But I think people kind of underestimate how much an athlete can do and handle on the isokinetics when it comes to these. Most of the times when I see people post on doing isokinetics in this matter, and it's kind of in that 3 to 4 set range. I think it needs to be more. Looking at data on my side, watching athletes. Again, I'll give Ben Prentice a shout out on this. This is something we sat and talked about, kind of going back and forth on what we were seeing doing isokinetics is like you have to be able to extend it into more sets. Just keep pushing the athlete as long as they're being able to handle it. So what I see right off the bat from set one to set two, you get this big jump, and that's just kind of in my mind the nervous system figuring out what's going on in the task at hand and how it needs to solve that problem. So you'll get this big jump going there, and then slow little rise, a little rise, little rise, and there'll be a little downturn, but it's no as long as it's within range, it's no worry. In my mind, it's just kind of keep pressing, keep pushing. And then like in this example shown here, we got eighth set was the best set, and that's you just keep going during this. It's grueling. The athletes love and hate it, where it's fatiguing, but it's a really important time, really important point of my off season where we don't have a lot of time to be able to do this thing, so we've got to get it in while we can. But it's also very apparent too when it's time to be done. You'll see force levels drop off. To me, that's when CNS fatigue occurs, is where they can no longer output that same force level. Some other variations on the ice kinetics that I do ever since getting cables only been in for a couple months now, but really, really happy. Um, really like this step up. Really great on single leg. Love it for golf when you're thinking kind of lead leg, trail leg. Thinking stability on the adductor and the glute as well. Rotationally, low ice kinetics there too. Same thing. Working on max force has been going through it here. And then same, I have an elevated split squat, belt set up. Um, really like this if still the main focus is getting them into full ranges of motion here. Going all the way down, getting that full depth. Great knee flexion. Looking really good. Once we get out of that phase, because with that work, um, you want to use it and kind of get away. That's another thing with isokinetics for me is it's when I'm using it to that level, it's not something I'm doing all throughout the year. It's just kind of a one important dose in the off season. I will do some isokinetics at a much lower level, kind of sprinkled out throughout in season. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Um, but that phase two, when you're thinking about like Cellier's kind of general adaptation syndrome, when you're thinking about that graph, that's the bottom there. They're going to be super fatigued. You're going to see their jump, like every metric that you're kind of tracking to see how progress is going is kind of plummets because it's a very fatiguing cycle, but it's a very important for me to get that super compensation going into doing more power work. So phase three for me, focus here is on concentric power. Monday, I make that my power day. Tuesday, we're doing field work. This is getting into more sprint stuff. Sticking with the concentric power theme, we're looking at med ball throws from a static position. Pool, again, never get too far away from the pool, still getting work in there. Thursday becomes another power day. Friday, flywheel now transitions into more. So if I was at an XL size wheel, this would be more large, and now we're going maybe a little bit less range of motion, but still speeds increasing here and what we're looking at there. And then Saturday, I turn that into a circuit day, much more of a movement kind of recovery, still addressing some things that we addressed outside of more power emphasis. So again, here, concentric power, a squat jump. Um, the main focus here is acceleration in this phase, looking to improve rate of force development. Same thing we were talking about earlier on that downswing duration. I'm looking time to peak power has to be 300 milliseconds. And then this is a great phase to start incorporating some contrast for some power work. I don't have a set range to talk to you about here. Like this is really where I lean into and depend on the data to kind of show me what's going on and when to keep going and when to hold up. But the rep ranges that I'm usually working in here is 2 to 4. This really important part of my work, when it comes on the concentric power side. So what I was just talking about here is kind of a load power profile, looking at when that synchro Smith setup, power outputs from a 33 kilo, 43, 53, 63, 73, 83, 93. So just working your way up in resistance and what that power output looks like. Yeah, we have this great increase here. We got peak power over here, but I'm not concerned. 73 is too heavy, in this example. It's too much. We're not hitting things in that time frame that we need to be hitting. Um, you might think that, okay, 33, actually, what I'm looking at here, if I'm using the example to kind of base off of what resistance I want for that athlete, um, my answer is blue. I think you can make a case for green, pink, or blue here, but right now I'm looking at what that peak power looks like, what that graph kind of angle is. And so we're still hitting these high levels. Yeah, it's at point or it's at 320 milliseconds here. Um, I'd be willing to bet working on some training of getting that within that 300 will happen pretty quickly. Or another important part of this, something that I might develop would be using both the blue and the green. So using that 33 and 53 kilo resistance and doing contrast set off that. So doing first starting with a 53, doing 3 reps there, next set going to 33, and it's kind of feeding off each other where getting a high power output, but going in a shorter amount of time, and then using that short amount of time and getting a higher power output. Home run swings, great exercise here. I got this one from going out and visiting Matt Price when I was in LA, for the US Open a couple of years ago. He talked about with the LA Kings and his hockey guys, using it as assessment tool. I throw it in there kind of throughout the year as assessment as well, kind of seeing where guys are at, peak power wise, in a rotational manner. What I want to see here, this same thing here with the graphs, I want to see that drift happen where things are happening faster, where we're getting to that peak power in a more efficient manner. Phase three with sprints, little side thing here with some baseball work that I do. Yes, I do use sprints with the golf guys. No, I don't really, I'm not caring a whole lot about form, or I do want to see an increase, but it's not obviously the main concern. It's nowhere near a KPI in my mind for golf. But I do, again, when I'm looking at hip extension and power, it's a resistance setting that I want and I want to incorporate. So when I do it with golf, it's always usually on a variable resistance, only setting it out for 20 meters. I'll put 50% body weight on 0 to 5 meters, and then I'll go to 10% at the target speed. How I set that target speed up is based on we'll do usually like 2 warm-up sets with that 15 kilos of body weight on at like a 10 meter kind of resisted start, looking at the graphs there of what speed they're at when they hit that 5 meter, and then adjusting there. With the baseball guys that I do, at this point of the year, they're usually coming out kind of leading into spring training. This would be kind of more towards the early time of that work where we're getting into day one. I'll do a variable resisted, 20 meters. They can handle a little bit better um, on the thing. So I'll start them on 20% body weight going 0 to 5, transitioning into a 10% body weight at target speed. Same setup where we're doing a couple of warm-ups, 10 meters of that 20% body weight. And I will say with these percentages, it's just a starting point. I just kind of want to see where they're at from there. It's always kind of micro tweaking off of that. Um, are they able to handle it? Are they accomplishing what I want them to? If not, lower it a little bit down. If they are, let's bump it up a little bit more and go. With the baseball guys too, every everything is contrasted here. It's always I'll do a resisted sprint and then contrast it with an unresisted. When I'm using it with golf, it's pretty block style where it's just like 6 to 8 of just resisted. But then on day two for baseball, I like an assisted acceleration there, going 20 meters, going 5% body weight on that. And I think the misconception when it comes to assisted acceleration, I think some people might look at it and think of it as more of kind of a way to get spinning and for stride frequency to decrease. But what I'm seeing in the data off of that is actually much more of a better stride length. And visually, what I'm seeing too is a much better projection angles from these guys. I think in the baseball world, when looking at stealing bases, in that sense, where I want them to get that acceleration obviously as soon as possible, and I want to see that projection when they get out. And start that base stealing pattern. I want to see those projection, those angles get hit. Phase four, getting into elastic power now. This is where I think the 1080 quantum really starts to show the difference in its importance and how to go about using it correctly. Monday for me, getting into more of a max strength emphasis day, where then I make that kind of potentiate into a Tuesday power day. Again, pool never leaves. Always happy to have pool work within every cycle. And then same thing where it's going into another max strength, potentiating into a power day. Saturday obviously being circuit and a little bit more lower intensity. So here off of this graph, it'll be a 1080 employee who I will not mention or I will not name. But I thought this was a really good visual to kind of show what I'm trying to get after here. So this was there. I was having them do a crossbody rotation with a little bit of eccentric overload, what they look like. And then I did want to show this angle right here is exactly what I'm going after when it comes to phase four. Um, Randy Huntington calls this kind of the dynamic isometric phase. Other names for it, I hear it called the switching phase. This point right here, extremely point in the world of athletics. It shows up in force plate, force curves as well, kind of in that transition from braking to propulsive. Want to see a good shift, but right here, I want to see this V. I think Rolf Ullmann used the terms kind of turning that U into a V. We want to see these sharp peaks because to me that is elastic energy, that is stretch shortening cycle, that is eccentric rate of force, concentric rate of force. Like this right here is what we're after. So this phase for me, it's all about improving stretch shortening cycle utilization. And we're increasing rate of force development, improving neuromuscular coordination, and then obviously it's an injury prevention thing. I think that gets lost where people think of like injury prevention as much more of a safe environment, but it really is. Are they able to make this transition happen in a really fast time frame? And if they're not, that's kind of where injuries tend to start to pop up. Kind of same thing here, very data driven off of what I'm seeing on how long I want to extend the sets, but it needs to be in that 6 to 10 rep range. And the reason for that, and what I'm looking at here when we're doing, so here's example, doing a power step up off the 1080 cable. Those the data that goes with it. I want to see this kind of expansion happen here where speeds really start to increase and kind of fan out both concentrically and eccentrically. Want to see this open up. To me, that's telling me that neurally, their body's kind of taking the governor off and allowing that to happen. It's understanding what it needs to happen and allowing it. And then from a filament winding standpoint, kind of where Titan really starts to do its work on kind of its elastic recoil. So what I want to see happen in these speeds is I want to see this open up and I want to see this increase. And that's really, unfortunately, it's really athlete dependent. I don't have a good gauge off of where to put the resistant modes at. Obviously, with the 1080 quantum, what's really great is being able to overload that eccentric and add a little bit of that too, which you can add in, but it's really athlete dependent, and you kind of have to play around and explore a little bit on where that is. Here, doing a repeat jump. Um, this came great research from Jan and Fabian out of Switzerland. I think they were the kind of first to look at repeat jump and how that goes off of that. What I'm looking for here, same thing on the graphs to go along with it. You're going to continue to see as the jumps go on. I want to see, again, speeds increase, and you're going to see this V shorten up. And both intra-session, I want to see that. And as we progress through the cycle, when I compare data, I want to see much better utilization and kind of a closing on that V. Power squat, really same thing, looking at peak power. Notice the drift here too as that data kind of keeps going. Want to see that speed go there. So that's kind of the thought process behind off season. Again, I'm not in a rush during an off season phase. Ideally, it would be great to get through all four phases, but realistically, it doesn't always happen. Very fine with pushing that phase four into in season, but then in season is kind of when we get to a much more chaotic time period, to say the least, when it comes to the PGA Tour. Right here, January through August, there is 33 PGA Tour events, and I think the tour average is usually around 23 events that each guy would play. Um, so time at home is kind of few and far between. You're getting these really small periods. What's really important programming wise is kind of creating a program that both expands when you do have that time home and can kind of put more work in on the training, but also constricts when you're on the road and you get away from it and you need, and the performance becomes the main directive. So for me, on a tournament week, both in a made cut and a missed cut, Monday tends to be a travel practice day. And the gym wise, that's more of a movement day. So it's kind of all body weight, kind of reopening. If you're familiar with this track and field world, kind of thinking more of like a shakeout. Um, just kind of dusting off, getting ready for the week ahead. Tuesday's heavy practice day for them, but also in the gym. That's the one time I have throughout the week to kind of get some max strength work in. Furthest away from Thursday, first day competition, and then if you're looking on the back side of it, if they just were traveling the week before, Sunday was the last tournament day, so it's kind of the furthest away that we have, both 2 days prior and post, to really get that work in. Then Wednesday, they usually have a pro-am. It's getting to be more 9 hole now, but there are a few 18 hole where it's a little bit more extended, but still want to get that work in. And it's got to be on Wednesday for the power work. I'll drop the sets, drop the volume, but intensity still has to stay high. Uh, Tournament rounds, warm-up days here. I know there are a few guys that, based off of, for those unfamiliar with the golf world, on the PGA Tour, they get a Thursday and Friday, they get an AM and PM tee time. So if they're AM on Thursday, PM on Friday, or if they're PM on Thursday, AM on Friday, um, there is a little bit of play there where I've seen guys kind of train after their AM round. So round finishes kind of at that 12:30, go grab some lunch, and then go get a workout in. Uh, I'm not against it, but to me, it's from when trying to implement it, it was never that great. Guys are tired, depending on how that round went too, is super. You can see a lot of variance there on the mood that they have coming in and the quality of work that's being done. So I'd rather focus here on quality of work earlier in the week and allow that not to happen. What I do though on the PM, whatever ends up being a PM warm-up time, that kind of becomes a mini workout, kind of extend the warm up a little bit or get a little bit more work in, take advantage of it, and then just allow the post round to be all recovery focused. The variance there, if they do miss a cut, that opens up a day for us where Saturday becomes another day to get high quality work in, right before they would travel on a Sunday or wherever they may be at. So Saturday then becomes another day where I'm trying to get some, depending on the athlete, whether it be they need to be more on that max strength side or more on that power side, depending on kind of where they sit. That's Saturday becomes an extra day to get more good work in. Then when we're off the week, usually, I mean, the variance, I'd say most PGA Tour guys, at most, they'll go as like 3 or 4 weeks on the road before they kind of need an off week and getting back home. Everyone's kind of individual off that. One of my guys will be part of the case study, Ben, I think, because last year when I started working with him, uh, I think he went 13 weeks in a row where he was on the road. So very different experience there of trying to program around that. Uh, but when we do get home, for me, first day is always a pool day. I want to get them in the pool right away, active recovery, working through when I do pool work, a lot of vertical, a lot of flotation belt kind of on for that decompression. The lymphatic work in the pool is great. Then doing some cuff work, really opening up hip ranges of motion there. Tuesday, again, kind of with the theme of the in season, want to kind of stay true to what they're going to have throughout a tournament week. So Tuesday remains kind of a max strength day. Wednesday, a power day. Thursday, movement, much lighter, kind of goes back to more of an active recovery kind of setup. Just getting in there, doing work. Friday, again, another chance, kind of expand it a little bit, get back to more max strength, and get another power session in. Case study here using 1080 equipment and how that goes. Um, here it was working with Ben Griffin. When I started working with him, his the way we got introduced, what he was looking for mostly was he was having really bad left quad tendinitis. So that's lead leg. So whenever he was in a bunker or kind of a weird lie, really having issues on that follow through of feeling that tweak and being really unhappy with where that was at and not wanting to miss time. So the tough thing with him being on the road was it kind of left what I wanted to do was way more isokinetic works with it. Wasn't really allowed to do as much, but we did a lot of isometric and some very slow eccentric work, um, which got him feeling better right away. Actually, after day one, he came back and he's like, that was the first day I was able to sit on the toilet comfortably and not have pain as I go down. So doing work there, but then in the off season, this past off season, that's where kind of really got to get into a lot more of the work and a lot more of the isokinetics. During his phase two, he went from a 1242 isokinetic squat to a 1571. His isokinetic row, showed the video earlier. That row went up from to 464 on the right and 43 on the left to 537 newtons and 539 newtons on the right and left. And then what I really like seeing when we got into more that phase three of that peak power work, his home run swing went from 1336 peak power watts and 1270 watts to 1827 and 1742. With especially with golf, you'll see it with baseball as well. There's always going to be a little bit with what side they swing on. There's always going to be higher levels there. I'm never worried about that. I want to see both go up. It'd be great to see it kind of come down a little bit, but it's never a main concern of mine, kind of narrowing that gap within there. And then how did the work that correlated here? So with that work that we've been doing, incorporating the isokinetics, incorporating 1080 with that, this was before we started working together. His club head speed here, 114.86. Within 1 year, that raise in 2.33. I don't, for those outside the golf world, it's a substantial increase. It's really good to see. Really good to show the improvements that he's seeing. And even better for me is seeing that we're continuing to trend in an upward direction. I want to continue to see that. It's not our main concern. Ben's never been the one, like he doesn't want to sell out for speed, but he is really happy knowing that the work that we're doing is kind of leading and grouping this. And then 2025 for him was a really big breakout year, 3 wins. Really, it's a great year. I think the only other two athletes on tour, the only other two players on tour for that were Scotty and Rory to kind of, so for him to be in that company is wonderful. Earned himself a Ryder Cup spot, set himself up sponsor wise. Really, it was a really great year for him and really great to see. Kind of finishing up here, just some user kind of tips and tricks. So this safety squat, when I have posted on social media, this seems to be a common question I'm getting is on this safety squat setup. How I made this was I kind of self-designed. It was shaft collars kind of welded onto these squat handles. Found a great fabricator who I kind of talked him through and sent him all the measurements and what I was looking for. JD Gym Equipped was his name. He did a really outstanding job. And then using that Kabuki X-Pad, I guess I don't really know where Kabuki's at anymore. I think they kind of fell off, but um, really, really important setup for me to have doing both that eccentric boost and that isokinetic work. Uh, Anytime to kind of get the bar off the back in a much more comfortable position. And again, safety and somewhere where they feel very comfortable to express that high force is really important. Um, Second video here, these Rock Exotica, um, they're the Omni Block 1.1. I found these 4 years ago when I first got the Quantums. If you have a Quantum or even if you have a 1080 cable, I highly recommend. These are the pulleys that you need when you're doing that gear to pulley work. Having that swivel on there works really well, doing rows and different movements where it's a much smoother feel. And the pulleys do matter because how that resistant feels, if it kind of gets gritty and if it's not a great pulley, like it's the numbers aren't going to be the same, and you need to have a good pulley for that. Then for the sprint stuff, the old tried and true came in the box with the original 1080 Sprint, the semi ball bearing orange ones. Love it. Use it extensively when I'm having the anchor in the ground, using a pulley for doing the jumps or anything ground resisted. Works really well. Great thing to have. And then when it comes to isokinetic work, um, doing isokinetic, or when it comes to rows, doing the isokinetic work, I think these handles are very, very important. Um, get out of that over gripping, really get into pushing, and really get in that force where you want to feel it up in that trap and upper back.
Fantastic. Super, super awesome presentation. Really enjoyed just the flow of first just setting the scene and going from what is this golf specific phrase? What does it actually mean to like here are my
Mhm.
4 categories? Definitely a big light bulb for myself. And then just going through the 4 phases of the GPP to the elastic power and kind of bringing it home with how does that actually fit into a calendar, right? So super, super awesome flow, easy to follow along. And we're almost at an hour here-ish. And we'll do maybe 10 minutes for Q&A and a little bit over an hour. And there's kind of 3 questions slash categories. We'll go general to specific. I have one on athlete feedback, one on eccentric boost, and then probably the most interesting would be kind of diving a little bit into these data-driven sets.
Mhm.
So we'll start. So you have these athletes, professionals, they've been on tour for a little while now. They're no strangers to training in the weight room and kind of things like that. And with all of your examples, these are exercises that you used to do anyways, with the sled
Mhm.
dragging, weighted push-ups, some sort of repeat jump type thing. What has been some of the athlete feedback on going from not using motorized resistance to training with you in the field, the data feedback, just these high-level pros, what do they say about kind of getting on some of this tech for the first time?
They love it. It's one of those things where it's you can't kind of do a sales pitch on just like verbalizing kind of what it like you have to feel it to really get it. and really understand it. And that's where you can kind of talk them through like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is what it's going to feel like. And until they get that and get that in hand, like it's completely different. I love to kind of see like just the face reaction of the first time they get into doing like a true isokinetic squat and really get into the eccentric boost work where it's like, whoa, like what was that? Like it's just a complete different thing that they've ever been experienced to.
And then with the eccentric boost, so for those who aren't familiar, I call it kind of like the can crusher, where literally
Hmm.
the machine is pulling you down at zero point 0.1 meters a second, no matter how hard you try, right? So that's how it's super maximal eccentric, because you're trying as hard as possible, but it's pulling you down. So one thing that I think is interesting with whether it's concentric isokinetics, or this would be like an eccentric isokinetic, is
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be 100% right away, and especially with it being truly super maximal. So, kind of what is your on-ramping? Do you start with like a 5 out of 10 RPE for a week or two and work your way up to 100%? Because I'm assuming you're not going 100% kind of off the rip. So, how do you coach Q and kind of progress up to that 100% eccentric boost?
Part of kind of the tempo eccentrics in phase one was getting them accustomed and building up to that slow kind of eccentric feel to kind of onboard them for going into more eccentric boost work kind of later on. And then first set as kind of a warm up is, hey, don't just feel it first. Kind of the cue that I kind of give on that is think of like an arm wrestling match and just lose, but don't lose right away. Like just kind of let it kind of take you down. And then as we get into more of the actual sets of the work, and that's where it becomes, if it's an arm wrestling match, like you're fighting to win the whole time here.
Interesting. Yeah. The arm wrestling is super cool. I'll definitely have to steal that myself if I had a synchro, hopefully one day. But last kind of question for from me, and then we'll let kind of Ola hop in, and then we'll wrap this up. So with the data-driven sets, the percent drop off, of course, there's the big obvious drop off, like the 10th set when you
Mhm.
in that example. But I mean, ten working sets, that's a lot. So is it just a big visual drop? Do you have a percent? Is it an athlete feedback, more subjective thing? So how do you determine if it's quantitative or qualitative, kind of when to call it on these kind of data-driven sets?
Really good question on the isokinetics. That's more a visual, like I kind of showed in the presentation. That's something that I see in very obvious kind of endpoint. Something I should have clarified on the power work. That's if it drops below 90 on that, that's where I kind of cut it
90%.
from there.
So 10%
Um,
drop off on the power
yeah,
work.
so 10% drop off on that. That's where it's just like, okay, the work, it's not true power work from what I'm trying to get to here. Cut it after that.
Mm. Fantastic. So Ola, we got 3 minutes left. If there's anything you want to hop
Three
in,
minutes, 3 minutes.
no pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, no, I think the eccentric boost is wonderful. Do you use like isokinetics concentrically, kind of like the opposite direction to get them prepped also for the eccentric boost? Do you think about that, or do you use other means? I know you touched upon it with the second question from Matt here.
In a sense of using isokinetics first and then going into eccentric boost.
Yeah, like in a later phase, like because when I start with isokinetics and do the transition, say I'm doing a squat, I introduce it in a concentric manner, the isokinetics, because I view the eccentric boost as an eccentric isokinetic.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
Um,
start the opposite way and then I go into the eccentric side, but I'm just curious to hear your experience on that.
yeah, I'd agree with you there. I guess another clarification point too is with especially with new athletes, and I'll give Ben as the example here. With him, like he had such low level of training, or like his training age was super low. Like he hadn't really been exposed as much to kind of a full-on training plan. So for him, where I haven't even gotten into the eccentric boost yet because there's too many other lower level things to adapt to first before we're even gonna get like I'm not just gonna throw them into it just because it's a cool feature and um because we can. It's I want them to adapt to lower things. So that's where with athletes like that, isotonics do come first as they get to it, and then as another off-season phase comes, that's where eccentric boost kind of comes in as much more of a mainstay in the program.
No, no, that's awesome. Um, Another one too, you said the number of sets with isokinetics, which I thought was interesting. Because you set up to 8 sets of your and that was obviously data driven for
Hmm.
the people that you work with, right?
Yeah.
Um, and those are 100% efforts, I assume.
Yeah. Pushing out as hard as they can the whole time.
And are you running 3 to 5 reps each of those sets, or like how many sets did you have in those sets again?
That in that example, it was a 4 rep set. Usually always 3 to 4.
Three to
I guess
four.
two to four, pretty general for isokinetics, but I tend to find
Yeah.
3 to 4 on the isokinetic for per set.
Yeah. No, because that's an interesting perspective. That's the no, that's that is very interesting. Some of my experience in that domain has been I've seen a couple like 4, but that's when I've been going to 5 reps
Mm,
um per set. But then it's been like 4 to 5 sets, and that's when they're kind of like just going off the edge and dropping off in their production.
hmm.
So, but this is training age. This is level of performance. There's a number of factors feeding this beast.
Yeah, yeah,
So, just a consideration there. I thought that was an interesting perspective. So, good, good. Thank you for bringing that up. That was
yeah.
very good. And also, thank you for showing that eccentric boost is not dangerous.
That's
It's highly effective.
it's highly
It.
effective if you set it up correctly. It's honestly one of the safest eccentrically things you can do um, from that
Thank
standpoint.
you. Could not agree more, sir.
As eccentric
Could
boost
not.
fits into a big plan. There's on ramping, not doing it
Yeah.
just because, as you mentioned with Ben. So
Yeah.
yeah, super, super underrated kind of feature. And
Yeah.
and maybe we've talked about getting it into the cable, so stay tuned. But your contact
We'll
info has
see.
been on the screen here, but I'll roll out the gold carpet for you to shamelessly plug anything that you want as we wrap up here. Where can the people get more of Coach Derek Schmidt?
Yeah, I'd say most actively on the social media is probably Instagram for me. Quickest response. I'll always respond to anybody reaching out. If you have a question or just want to connect, um, no problem there. Same thing with email. Super easy. Reach out. I always try to be pretty good on getting a response there.
Fantastic. So, thank you very much for your time, effort putting this all together. Ola, thank you for joining. Everyone who is here live and everyone who is going to be watching the replay kind of later. So, thank you very much. Looking forward to the next one and go make speed happen.